Good morning, guys. Hope you guys had a good weekend. This is going to be a three-part lesson. So this is going to take us through all week. Each of the parts are pretty short and straightforward, and the IXL sections that go along with them should also be pretty straightforward for you as well. We're going to really start to dig deeper into linear equations, straight lines, how do we draw them, where do they come from, and then the equations that make them. So we're going to start off by simply graphing a linear equation based on clues that we are given. And we're going to be using the slope idea from last week a lot. So we're going to start off with a share screen here as we just look at some examples. So the first thing I want you to look at is this idea of slope and the fact that, again, slope is rise over run. So remember, you're going to go up or down. If it's positive, it's going to go up. If it's down, if it's negative, you're going to go down. And then it's going to be side to side, and we pretty much run to the right. So the elevator goes up or the elevator goes down, the doors open, and then we get out. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple of examples that give us clues, and we're just going to use those clues to draw our line. So the first problem here, graph the line that has a slope of 1/6 and includes the point of 0, 1. So what that means is we know that our line has to go through the point 0, 1. So that's the first point I'm going to draw. Now I need more points. So what I am going to do to get more points is I'm going to use this slope of 1/6, and I'm going to remember that slope is rise over run. So from this blue dot that I drew, I am going to rise 1 and then run 6 to the right. So I'm going to rise 1 and then I'm going to run 6 to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to do this as many times as I can fit. Now the problem is if I go up and to the right, I run out of space. So I am just going to draw a line through those 2 points. So the line that has the 2 clues, a point of 0, 1, and a slope of 1/6 would look like this. And again, all I did was plot the point and then use the slope to get more. So let's try this again. Graph the line that has a slope of 3 and includes the point 2, 4. So let's start off by plotting the point 2, 4. So I'm going to go over 2 and up 1, 2, 3, 4. So remember, that's where that point goes. Remember, plotting points are going to be the opposite of slope. So you have to remember how to plot a point. Now, slope is rise over run. Excuse me. So if I have my slope of 3, I need to make it a fraction. Well, what can I do with any whole number to make it a fraction? I put it over 1. Excuse me. Why do I want it to be a fraction? Well, I need my rise over my run. So anytime your slope is a whole number, you're going to turn it into a fraction over 1 so you can get your rise over run. So let's go back to this blue dot I drew. I am going to rise 3 and run 1. 1, 2, 3, and run 1. Do it again because I've got room. 1, 2, 3, run 1. And now I'm going to draw my line through those points. And we're good to go. So 2 clues, a point and a slope. Let's take a look at 2 more examples here. The slope is -4/5, and the point is 0, 6. So we're going to plot our point at 0, 6. So 0, 6 puts me right there. And then remember our rise and our run. -4 over 5 is my rise and my run. If my rise is -4, now my elevator goes down. So from this point, I'm going to go down 4 floors. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to run to the right 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to do it again. Down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Run 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now we're going to draw our line through those points. So again, we plot our point. We use our slope for our rise and our run. The last example that we're going to do here is going to be a slope of 0. And I want to change this point here from 4, 0. Let's make that 0, 4. Let's flip-flop those two numbers. That'll help us out here. So I'm going to plot my point at 0, 4. So 0, 4 goes right there. And now a slope of 0. Well, if you recall, a slope of 0 was going to be a horizontal line. And that's because my 0 over 1 means rise nothing, run 1. Rise nothing, run 1. Rise nothing, run 1. So you'll see that as I plot all those points, it's just going to create a flat horizontal line for us. So a pretty basic idea of simply plotting a point wherever it tells you on the grid and then using the slope to get more points. Okay, so let's stop sharing screen for a moment there and let's take a look at what that will look like on IXL. So if we go to our IXL screen, for this particular section, we're going to be looking at Y5, graph a line using slope. So when I click on this and I bring up Y5, it's going to give me the same sort of clues. Graph a line that has a slope of 1/3 and includes the point 0, 5. So we're going to plot our first point at 0, 5. So 0, 5 is right here. And then my slope is 1/3. So that's rise 1, run 3. So from here, rise 1, run 3. 1, 2, 3. Click both of them, and it makes the line for you, and then you submit. So a pretty straightforward section there on graphing, including a point and a slope. Okay, and that's day 1 of this week's lessons. And so you're going to be doing IXL Y5, and you need to get a SMART score of 80. Anything above that's extra credit. So you can go ahead and stop now for day 1. For those of you who want to work ahead, if you wanted to look at day 2 and day 3, you can. This video is going to continue on with day 2 now. All right, so this is going to be Wednesday's lesson. Wednesday's lesson is going to introduce us to the idea of y equals mx plus b. Now, we saw that back in January. Y equals mx plus b is what we call slope-intercept form. And the m and the b are going to be incredibly important. You're definitely going to want to write this down when we start talking about what we're doing here. So let's just start by covering up the bottom there. So slope-intercept form of linear equations is y equals mx plus b. Now the key is, and we should already know what the letter m is. The letter m we spent time working with last week and just used in the previous section. M is the slope. And when y is alone, and that's what we have with y-intercept form, y is alone, the number touching x is your slope. The number all by its lonesome, the b, that's a y-intercept. And if you recall, a y-intercept is where a line crosses the y-axis. So if we have y alone, and we have an equation that is in y equals mx plus b form, those two clues are in your equation. Now, this x and this y, that would be what we would use in a table. So if you recall when we had to complete the table, that's your input and your output. Okay, so y is alone, and we have these two major clues in our equation. So let's take a look at what they will ask you. So here are two equations that are in mx plus b form. Y equals mx plus b. And that plus b is generic. It could be minus b. Well, if I recall up here, the number touching x is the slope. So in this equation, the number touching x is 2, so the slope equals 2. Now that would be a rise and a run of 2 over 1. Remember, the y-intercept is all by its lonesome. So the number all by its lonesome in this equation is plus 4, so the y-intercept is 4. And this is all we're going to do in the first part, is we're just going to look at an equation and we're going to identify the clues. For this next equation, y equals mx plus b. Well, the m and the b, the m is the number touching x, so in this case, that's negative 3/4. So the slope is negative 3/4. Now the y-intercept, the plus b, in this case, is actually a minus b. So the y-intercept is the number all by its lonesome, so that would be negative 7. All right. So let's have you try a couple. Let's see if we can get the clues out of here. All right, and these first two on the top, we'll leave that one here. For that first example, the first thing you need to recognize is that if it's just an x, we need to remember what number is in front. And if there is no number in front of the x, you can put a 1 there. So anytime you see just an x, there's a 1 in front. So take a few seconds and get the answers for the slope and the y-intercept for both of these equations. All right, let's see what you got for answers here. The first equation, y equals mx plus b. Remember, the slope is the number touching x, so in this case, the slope is 1. If I wanted to make that rise over run, I would make it 1 over 1. The y-intercept is always the number by its lonesome, so in this case, that would be 7. For this next equation, the number touching x is 13, so the slope is 13. If I wanted to make that rise over run, it would be 13 over 1. And the y-intercept is the number all by its lonesome at the end, which in this case is 4/7. And it's fine for that to be a fraction. Notice y is alone in every one of these problems. Okay. The last example for this type of problem is going to be one that is a little bit special and unique. Y equals 7. I want you to look at that equation and think about what's missing. If you recognize that the x is missing, then you were spot on. So what does that mean? Well, it means that this can be written as y equals 0x plus 7 because the x is missing. There's a 0 there. Well, what would that make the slope now if I recognize that there is no x, so that would make it 0x. The slope is 0, and the y-intercept is 7. And that is, in a gist, the part 2 for this week's y-intercept, or excuse me, y equals mx plus b lessons. Your IXL assignment for this one, and let's go ahead and pull up the IXL so you can see what that'll look like. The IXL for this one is going to be the letter Y, and in this case, it's going to be, let's see, Y4. Slope-intercept form, find the slope and the y-intercept. So if we pull that up here, they're going to give you an equation. Find the slope of the line y equals 1/9 x plus 1. And all it wants is the slope. So you just have to recognize the slope is the number that's touching x. And so 1/9 is the slope. You don't even necessarily have to give both clues. Find the slope of the line, y equals 6x minus 4. That's going to be 6. They may ask you for the y-intercept. They might ask you for the slope. Okay, and so that's going to be the IXL section for this particular lesson. That would be the second lesson for this week. The remaining portion of this video is going to be the final section for this week's lessons. So you can stop now. Or if you want to continue on to part 3, you can continue on to part 3. I'm going to go ahead and move on to part 3, which is using the exact same idea as part 2. And so let's go ahead and share screen here so we can understand the opposite direction. So if I go here and I remember that y equals mx plus b, and m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. The last section for this week is going to give you the clues and then simply ask you to write the equation. So you are going to be given a slope and a y-intercept, and they simply want you to plug in and solve. So you are going to replace the m and the b. So in this case, 3 is going to go in place of the m, and -7 is going to go in place of the b. So you're going to get y equals 3x plus -7. So I replace the m with 3 and the b with -7. Now this piece right here, do not, and we've talked about it before, do not leave your answer with a plus and a minus. So the truth is, when I plug this in, the answer is simply just going to be y equals 3x minus 7. I don't even need to put the plus and negative there. So all I'm doing is taking the 2 clues and plugging them in for m and b. Let's take a look at another example here. Our slope is -1/4. Our y-intercept is 5. And I'm going to plug that in for where slope goes and for where y-intercept goes. I'm just going to plug the 2 clues in and write my equation. So this equation is going to be y equals, I need my slope, so -1/4 x. And then my y-intercept is +5. That's all we're doing, just write the equation. All right. Let's have you try one now. Go ahead and write your equation for this one in mx plus b form using those clues. And then pay close attention here because the y-intercept has a negative sign in front. So I'll give you a moment. Write that equation. All right, let's go ahead and check your answer now. Our slope and our y-intercept. So y equals 5/3 x because the 5/3 needs to touch the x. And then at the end, -7/3. They're both fractions, that's okay. Okay. And then let's take a look at 2, and I won't say special ones, but a little bit here. So a slope of 0. So this is going to be y equals 0x minus 3. Now remember, 0x from the part 2 means x isn't there. So when I write my final answer, this disappears because it's not there. If I have 0 x's, that means they're all gone. So y equals -3. The final one, slope of 1 and y-intercept of -2. So this means y equals 1x minus 2. Now you can write your answer that way, but the best way to write that is we don't need to put a 1 in front of the x. We know that if there's an x there, that means there's only one of them. So the best way to write this answer would simply to be write it as y equals x minus 2. We don't need the 1 in front. If it's there, that's okay, but typically you're not going to see it in front when you do that. All right. Let's go ahead and take a peek at the IXL section so you know what it is that we're going to be doing, and then you guys can go ahead and get to work. So this is going to be section Y8. A line's y-intercept is 4, and its slope is 8. What is the equation in slope-intercept form? Well, remember, the number touching x is always the slope, so I'm going to put the 8 right there. And the y-intercept is the number at the end, so I'm simply just going to put the 4 in there. So you're just going to take the 2 clues and plug them in. Here's one with a negative. You'll see they already put the negative sign in the equation. There's a line whose slope is 3 and whose y-intercept is -4. So a slope of 3 goes right there. And I'm not going to type in a negative again because they already put the negative there for me. So I'm simply just going to put the 4 in there. Remember, if you typed in -4, what does that mean? That means there's 2 negatives. That would be a double negative, which would make a positive, and that would be wrong. So I'm just going to put a 4 in there because the -4 and the -4 both set up and work for me. Okay. So this is the final part for this week's lessons. All of this week had to do with slopes and then your y equals mx plus b equations. 3 sections of IXL that go along with them. I would highly recommend that you guys go back and look at this if you need to. Hopefully, it's pretty straightforward for you and you can get through the IXL rather quickly this week. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow.